The morning I found out my wife of 31 years had never needed that wheelchair, I was standing in a hospital corridor in Winnipeg holding a Tim Hortons cup I'd forgotten to drink. The coffee had gone cold. I remember staring at the paper sleeve on the cup and thinking, this is the smallest, most ridiculous thing to notice when your entire life is being dismantled in front of you. Her name was Evelyn, my Evelyn, and I had pushed her chair, changed her bedding, crushed her pills into applesauce, and told her every single morning for 6 years that she was the bravest person I had ever known. I was 62 years old when the truth came out. Old enough to know that people lie. Old enough to have buried my parents, survived a layoff, watched 2 of my closest friends go through divorces. I thought I understood the weight of hard things. I didn't understand anything. Let me start at the beginning, because none of this makes sense without it. Evelyn and I met in 1988 at a community rink in St. Vital. I was 27, working for Manitoba Hydro, and she was there with her younger sister watching a shinny game. She had this laugh, loud, completely unself-conscious, and I heard it before I ever saw her face. We were married 2 years later. We bought a house in St. Boniface, had 2 kids, a dog named Biscuit who chewed through 3 garden hoses, and 30 years of the ordinary, beautiful life that most people don't appreciate until it's gone. The accident happened in the winter of 2017. Black ice on the perimeter highway. Her car spun, hit the guardrail, and she was airlifted to the Health Sciences Center. I got the call at work. I drove to that hospital, doing 80 in a 60 zone, and I've never been so frightened in my life. Not before, not since. She survived. But the doctors told us the spinal damage was severe. She would not walk again. I never questioned it. Why would I? I had watched her cry when the physiotherapist told her. I had held her hand in that sterile room when she asked, in a voice so small it didn't sound like her, whether she'd ever be able to dance at our daughter's wedding. I had driven home that night and sat in the driveway for 45 minutes before I could go inside and keep it together for the kids. Our daughter was 19 then. Our son was 23. Both of them rallied around their mother the way good kids do, but it was me who became her primary caregiver. I retired early from Manitoba Hydro at 60. Our savings were solid. I had been careful with money my whole life, and we owned the house outright by then. So I told myself it was fine. More than fine. It was what you do for someone you love. I built a ramp at the front door. I converted the main floor bathroom. I learned how to transfer her from the bed to the chair, how to prevent pressure sores, how to manage her medications. There was a whole regime of pills. A neurologist prescribed them. A GP monitored them, and every 3 months we went back for follow-up appointments, where the doctors would check her reflexes and make small adjustments, and tell me I was doing a wonderful job. She seemed stable. That was the word they used, stable. What I didn't know, what I had no reason to suspect, was that her GP, a man I had trusted completely for over a decade, was not who he claimed to be. The appointment that changed everything was in October of 2023. Our regular doctor was away at a conference, and we were seen by a locum, a substitute physician named Dr. Ibarra, a quiet, methodical man in his 50s who had come up from a practice in Thunder Bay to cover the clinic for 2 weeks. He reviewed Evelyn's file carefully. Then he did something our regular doctor hadn't done in at least 2 years. He conducted a full neurological examination himself, right there in the room. He asked me to wait in the hallway. I didn't think anything of it. I went and got a coffee from the machine down the corridor. I sent a text to my son. I looked at the weather app on my phone and wondered if I should put the snow tires on before the weekend. When Dr. Ibarra came to find me, his face was careful in a way I now know means a person is deciding how much to say and in what order. He brought me into a small consultation room, not Evelyn's room, a different one, and he closed the door. He sat across from me. He said, very quietly, that he had concerns. He said the neurological presentation he had just observed was not consistent with the level of spinal injury documented in her file. He said he wanted to arrange an urgent independent assessment and that until it was completed, I should be aware, and here he paused and looked at me with genuine sorrow, that I should consider calling the police. I thought I had misheard him. I asked him to repeat it. He did. I sat with that for a long moment. The fluorescent light above us buzzed slightly. Somewhere down the hall, a phone was ringing. I said, as calmly as I could manage, "What exactly are you telling me?" And he told me. The independent assessment was arranged within a week. 2 neurologists, brought in from the Health Sciences Center. They examined her without her knowing the full reason for the consultation. She was told it was a routine second opinion. The results were unambiguous. There was no evidence of complete spinal cord injury at the level documented. There was evidence of voluntary muscle control that should have been impossible if the original injury had been as described. My wife was not paralyzed. She had not been paralyzed, the specialists believed, for at least 4 years, possibly longer. The police were involved before I fully understood why. What came out over the following weeks was this: our family doctor, the one who had managed her condition for 6 years, had been falsifying her medical records. He had adjusted test results, written misleading reports, and prescribed medications that maintained a kind of learned physical dependency that kept Evelyn compliant and convincingly symptomatic. He had been paid to do this. Not by a stranger, by Evelyn's brother. Her brother's name was Clifton. Clifton was 5 years older than Evelyn, lived in Calgary, and had always had a complicated relationship with our family. He was charming in company, difficult in private, and had spent most of his adult life managing money that was never quite his. Their parents had left a modest estate, a house in River Heights, and a small investment portfolio, and when the parents died within 2 years of each other in 2014 and 2015, the estate had been divided. Evelyn received her share. So did Clifton, but Clifton's share had gone the way these things go with certain people. He had debts, bad ones. What the police pieced together, and this took months because financial fraud is slow and careful work, was that Clifton had approached Evelyn sometime in late 2016, before the accident, with a scheme to access her portion of the estate and redirect it through a series of accounts he controlled. Evelyn had refused. Clifton had then, the investigators believe, arranged the accident. That is the sentence I still cannot read without having to put something down and walk away from it. The black ice that night on the perimeter highway was not entirely a coincidence. There is evidence. A witness who came forward later, phone records, a man in Steinbach who said Clifton had approached him about a job, that the conditions of that accident were engineered. Evelyn's car had been tampered with. The investigation is still ongoing as I write this, and I have been told by the Crown not to say more about the specifics, so I won't. But I will say that the word attempted murder was used in my presence by a detective in the Major Crimes Unit, and that I went home that evening and sat in the dark for a very long time. After the accident, with Evelyn genuinely injured and in the hospital, Clifton had pivoted. The original plan had failed. She had survived, but her survival created a new opportunity. He had connections, somehow, to the doctor. The doctor agreed. And the rest was 6 years of slow, careful theft conducted inside my own house. Because here is what I had not understood. While I was caring for my wife, while I was managing her medications and her appointments and her entire physical life, she had signed documents. She told me later, and I believe her, I do, because I've had to choose to believe her or lose my mind entirely, that she had not understood what she was signing. The medications she was on affected her cognition. Her brother had brought documents to the house, on visits I was sometimes present for and sometimes not. He told her they were insurance forms, estate planning, routine paperwork. They were not. They were transfers. Her share of the estate, redirected, a life insurance policy restructured, A joint account drained slowly over years in amounts small enough not to trigger automatic flags. When I found out how much was gone, I had to ask the detective to tell me again. I had heard the number correctly the first time. I just needed a moment. He had taken, over 6 years, approximately $340,000. Our daughter found out in a phone call I made to her from a parking lot because I couldn't say it inside the house. She didn't speak for almost a full minute. Then she said, "Dad, are you safe?" Which was such a specific and terrible question that I had to pull myself together very deliberately before I could answer her. Our son drove up from Regina that weekend. He didn't say much. He is not a man who says much when things are serious. He just showed up and he stayed, and that was the right thing. The hardest part was Evelyn herself, because she was not simply a victim of her brother's scheme. She had known for at least 2 years before the truth came out that she was recovering. Not fully. The original injury had been real, and there was genuine damage that had healed imperfectly, and she did walk with a cane by the time everything unraveled. But she had known she could stand. She had known she could stand. She had known she could take steps. And she had not told me. She said she was afraid. She said the doctor had told her that if she disclosed her recovery, her brother would find out, and that her brother had made clear she believed this, she said, genuinely believed it, that he would harm her further, that the accident had not been an accident, and she had always known it from the moment she woke up in that hospital, and that she had spent 6 years, paralyzed by fear as much as by anything else. I sat with her in the living room, in the chair she had sat in for 6 years, her in the armchair, me on the couch, and I listened to all of it. I listened for a long time, and when she finished, I said that I needed some air, and I went out and walked around the block 3 times in the November cold, and I tried to locate inside myself the capacity to separate the woman I had loved for 30 years from the woman who would let me push her in a chair she didn't need. I am still locating it. I want to be honest about this because I think the honest version is the only version worth telling. There are people in my life who want me to say I have forgiven her completely, that the fear she lived with explains everything, that she was as much a prisoner as I was in a different way. And perhaps all of that is true. Her counselor says it is. The victim services coordinator assigned to our case was very clear that coercive control by a family member can produce exactly the kind of paralysis Evelyn described. But I am 62 years old, and I retired from a job I was good at to care for a woman who is capable of walking to the kitchen, and I need time. That is the honest answer. I need time. Clifton was arrested in Calgary in January of 2024. He was extradited to Manitoba. He was charged with fraud over $5,000, breach of trust, and this came later as the accident investigation progressed, criminal negligence causing bodily harm. His lawyer is working to keep the more serious charges from proceeding, and the Crown's case is still being built. I cannot tell you how it ends, because I don't know yet. The doctor had his license suspended pending a College of Physicians and Surgeons review. He is facing his own charges. He cooperated with investigators in exchange for certain considerations, which means he told them things that helped make the case against Clifton stronger. I don't feel particularly charitable toward him, but I understand why the deal was made. The money, most of it, is gone. Some of it went to Clifton's debts. Some of it went to the doctor. Some of it, the investigators believe, is in accounts that may never be fully traced. A civil case is being prepared, but I have been cautioned that recovery is unlikely to be complete. I have had to make adjustments. The house is still ours. The retirement savings, separate from what Evelyn had inherited, are intact. I am not destitute. But I had a plan for the last chapter of my life, and that plan has been altered. And at 62, that is not a small thing. What I didn't expect was the grief that came after. Not for the money, for the years. 6 years of waking up early to manage medications that were keeping my wife sedated and dependent. 6 years of learning everything a home care worker learns: wound care, transfer techniques, bladder management schedules, because I wanted to be the one taking care of her. 6 years of telling myself that this was love, that this was what 30 years of marriage looked like when it was tested, that I was doing the right thing. I was doing the right thing. I know that, but there is something specific and cruel about discovering that your sacrifice was unnecessary. Not that it was unwanted or unappreciated, but that the problem you were solving was manufactured, that someone decided your goodness was a resource to be exploited. My neighbor, a retired teacher who has been a steadying presence through all of this, said something to me in the spring that I think about often. She said, "The love you gave was real. It doesn't become less real because someone lied about the reason." I am still deciding whether I believe that. Some days I think she is completely right. Some days I wake up at 4 in the morning and I think about all the things I didn't do in those 6 years. The trip to Prince Edward Island we kept postponing, the hockey games I didn't go to because I didn't want to leave Evelyn alone. The friendships that quietly lapsed because caregiving has a gravity that pulls everything inward. And I feel something that isn't grief exactly. It's more like the particular loneliness of discovering that the story you were living wasn't the story you thought it was. Evelyn and I are separated now. We are not divorced. We are not, I think, finished. But we are not living together. And we are not the same people who sat across from each other in St. Vital in 1988, laughing at something I can't even remember anymore. She is in an apartment in St. Vital, Boniface, close to our daughter. She is in therapy. She has started, she told me on the phone last month, to walk without the cane on good days. I am in the house in St. Boniface. Biscuit is long gone, obviously. The ramp at the front door is still there. I haven't taken it down yet. I keep meaning to. My son suggested maybe I keep it, because one of us will need it eventually anyway. And I laughed harder than I have laughed in a long time, because that is the kind of thing that is only funny after enough years have passed to make it funny. What I want people who are listening to this to understand is that the thing that nearly undid me, the thing that was harder than the fraud and the betrayal and the lost money and the lost years, was a much simpler question. The question I asked myself in that hospital corridor in October of 2023, holding a cup of cold coffee, after Dr. Ibarra told me what he had found. The question was, how did I not know? 6 years, 30 years, I knew this woman. I knew the way she held her fork, the specific sound she made when she was trying not to cry, the expression she got when she was pretending to agree with something. I had loved her carefully and paid close attention, and I had not seen it. The victim services coordinator told me that this is entirely normal, that people who perpetrate this kind of fraud specifically rely on the trust of the people closest to them, and that the closer you are, the harder it is to see. That I was not foolish, that I was targeted because I was trustworthy. I understand that. I believe it intellectually, but standing in that corridor, I was just a 62-year-old man who had pushed his wife's wheelchair to the car every morning for 6 years and smiled at her while doing it, and I needed a moment before I could be rational about any of it. I still need that moment, honestly. Some mornings I need it again. If you're carrying something like this, a betrayal you didn't see coming, a sacrifice that turned out to be built on a lie someone else told, I don't have the answer for how you move through it. I'm still moving through it. I go to the curling club on Thursday evenings with my neighbor's husband. I call my kids. I take the long route home sometimes just to give myself a few extra minutes in the car. The ramp is still at the front door. Maybe I'll take it down in the spring. Maybe I'll leave it. Some things you keep not because you need them anymore, but because they remind you that you were for all those years a man who showed up. And whatever else was taken from me, that's the part no one could get to.